Once again, we find ourselves at a scene change. Jesus is no longer speaking to people on the seaside. Now he's in Galilee and he's waiting for the Feast of Tabernacles. We're going to be in John chapter 7 today, so look at verses 1 through 9 with me. It says, "After this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He would not go about in Judea because the Jews were seeking to kill him. Now the Jews' Feast of Booths was at hand, so his brothers said to him, 'Leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples may also see the works you are doing. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world.' For not even his brothers believed in him. Jesus said to them, 'My time has not yet come, but your time is always here. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify about it that its works are evil. You go up to the feast. I'm not going up to this feast, for my time has not yet fully come.' After saying this, he remained in Galilee." Although this isn't the point of our text today, I think there's a timeless truth in these few verses that we find, and it does fit into the larger narrative of what John was trying to show us. And that's this. People have always felt the need to try and control the plan and the timing of Jesus. And if I'm pointing a finger at anybody, it's myself. Jesus' brothers, they were urging him to go, even taunting him a little bit because they didn't believe what he said about himself. But Jesus knew that this was not the right time for him to go yet. And don't we do the same exact thing? Aren't we impatient people? We want the Lord to move on our time frame and within our parameters, within our plan, and according to what we think ought to be done. But that's just not how Jesus operates, is it? And that's a good thing because he knows things that we don't know. He can see the big picture in a way that we can't see it. And he acts within the parameters of what he knows is best for his glory and for our good. So before we moved into the following verses, it'd be good for us to take a look at this phrase that Jesus used a couple of times there. He said, "My time is not yet come." In our English Bible, as it's translated for us as we read it, this isn't the first time we've heard Jesus say, "My time is not yet come," even in the book of John. When Jesus was at the wedding, he used the same phrase, but there's a difference in what he was saying. The Greek words are a little different. At the wedding, Jesus was referring to his glorification, saying, "It's not my time for my glory to be revealed." The Greek, in that situation, it reveals or it renders a significant event. But in this instance, it's more like what we mean when we ask, "What time is it?" It's an actual measurable moment that can be specified. So Jesus wasn't refusing to go to the festival completely, not like he was saying he was never going to go. In fact, we're going to read in a moment that he does go up there. He just knew that by showing up at the hour that his brothers were going and wanted him to go and urging him to go would cause more problems than what it was worth. So when the right time on the clock does come, Jesus goes ahead and goes. We don't know. Maybe it's the next day. Maybe it's the next couple of days. We don't really know. But we know that Jesus does go up. Look at verses 10 through 13 with me. It says, "But after his brothers had gone up to the feast, then he also went up, not publicly, but in private. The Jews were looking for him at the feast and saying, 'Where is he?' And there was much muttering about him among the people. While some said, 'He is a good man,' others said, 'No, he is leading the people astray.' Yet for fear of the Jews, no one spoke openly about him or of him." So Jesus goes ahead and makes his way to the festival, but it's not the way that his brothers were urging him to go. As they didn't believe, they wanted him to prove himself. It's not the way that they thought he should go. They still wanted him to prove himself, but Jesus showed up quietly, privately, and he just wandered around. He listened. He would use the phrase that we use today, he read the room. He was listening what people were saying about him. He got a grasp of what they were saying, what they were thinking. And isn't it interesting to look back at Scripture from centuries ago and see that it really isn't all that different than the situation we find ourselves in today. People then, It's clear that the Jews were threatened by him. They were looking for him, just waiting for him to come and disrupt their legalism. Everyone else is talking about him, and it's a mixed bag of thoughts. Some people are saying, man, he's a good man. Other people are saying, no, he is lying to people. He's lying to everyone. He's selling them something that just isn't true. And isn't this the similar situation that we find ourselves in today? Everyone has an opinion about Jesus. Some people like him. Some people don't. Some people are threatened by him. Jesus hears all of this chatter. He hears what's being said. He knows what's going on. Jesus can feel the tension that must be going on at the Feast of Booths. Look what it says in verse 14. It says, about the middle of the feast, Jesus went up into the temple and began teaching. The Jews therefore marveled, saying, how is it that this man has learning when he has never studied? So Jesus answered them, my teaching is not mine, but his who sent me. If anyone's will is to do God's will, he will know whether the teaching is from God or whether I am speaking on my own authority. The one who speaks on his own authority seeks his own glory, but the one who seeks the glory of him who sent him is true, and in him there is no falsehood. Has not Moses given you the law? Yet none of you keeps the law. Why do you seek to kill me? The crowd answered, you have a demon. Who's seeking to kill you? Jesus answered them, I did one work, and you all marvel at it. Moses gave you circumcision, not that it is from Moses, but from the fathers, and you circumcise a man on the Sabbath. If on the Sabbath a man receives circumcision, so that the law of Moses may not be broken, are you angry with me because of on the Sabbath I made a man's whole body well? Do not judge by appearances, but judge with a right judgment. As Jesus is teaching, some of his listeners, they can't believe that he has this kind of knowledge. They can't believe that he knows what he knows, because the truth is Jesus does not have the credentials that most of the people that they listen to have. He didn't make it as far in the school system as they made it. I mean, he's just a carpenter from Nazareth who hangs out with a bunch of outcasts, a bunch of fishermen, and things like that. His knowledge did not make any sense to those who are listening. And Jesus' response to their question reveals a couple of things to us. First, it reveals that if we genuinely seek truth, we can objectively listen and learn what God's Word says. If we're seeking to do the will of God, we can discern what is true and what isn't. You know, I had an atheist approach me several years ago, and he wanted to ask me some questions about Jesus, about morality, about why I believed what I believed. And this is what I told them. I said, I'll be glad to answer your questions depending on what your motives are. If you're genuinely seeking truth, if you're genuinely seeking to form an opinion and possibly follow God with an open heart, if you're genuinely seeking truth, then I'll talk. But if you're just trying to get me in one of those gotcha moments where you ask an impossible question so that I stumble over my answer, I have no interest in having that conversation. Because that's a lot of the time, that's what happens. And it doesn't have to be an atheist to fall into this sort of thinking. Christians can fall into this same sort of struggle with other Christians while talking about differing theological beliefs. It's just as easy. If we want to learn seeking the truth, then God will show up and we will be able to discern what the truth is. But if our only reason for asking questions and trying to learn is not necessarily to seek the truth, but just so we can prove somebody wrong, then we're never going to be able to discern what God's will is. We're never going to be able to figure out what the right and proper answers to life's deepest questions are. In the same response, Jesus says that there's no motivation for him to lie. Remember, some people called Jesus a liar just a few verses ago. They said he's lying to people. And Jesus said if he was fabricating it, he'd be making himself look better. But he says, I'm not lying. I'm making the one who sent me look better. He'd make himself look better if that was the case, if he was lying. And he further illustrates his point about the Jews' hypocrisy and their judgment by saying that they don't even keep the law themselves. They were mad because he healed a man on the Sabbath, but they themselves will practice circumcision on the Sabbath so that they can make sure that it happens on the 8th day. See, there was a Jewish ritual about circumcision that it had to happen on the 8th day. Well, any woman who has ever had a child without being induced or whatever can tell you, you really can't control. When that baby comes, that baby's going to come. And so in this Jewish tradition, if the 8th day happened to fall on the Sabbath, of course they would circumcise that baby. They had this deal called the hierarchy of precedence when it came to the law. If performing the circumcision on the Sabbath kept it happening on day 8, it was actually more merciful and within the law to do so. They did it all the time. And Jesus, on just one occasion, did the same thing. He showed mercy, keeping the law, but it happened to be on the Sabbath. And so Jesus ends this section and says, judge correctly. You're judging by what you see, you're judging by what you think, but you need to judge correctly. Jesus had a specific plan and a specific message. And if we approach everything with His glory in mind, knowing that His plan is perfect, that His timing is perfect, and that His message is perfect, we will be able to discern and see that. Oftentimes, however, we're looking at everything with our own plans, with our own thoughts, and we're wondering, when is the Lord going to catch up to what I have going on? When is He going to catch up to my plans and my thoughts? But that's an improper way of looking at things. Let us seek to do God's will. Let us seek truth. Let's search for the truth in His Word for the proper motives. And let us judge correctly what Jesus is up to.